Out of the Ordinary Insights, brought to you by Investex Specialist Bank.
You're watching Captains of Industry here on CNBC Africa. I'm speaking to Mr. Raman Dhawan. He is the Managing Director of Tata Africa Holdings. Mr. Dhawan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I want to go back to 1977. I've been doing a little research on Tata Africa Holdings, and I believe you were deployed into Zambia and told to survey the landscape and look for opportunities. Can you take us back to that time?
Well, you've got the year is right. And it's been really a long journey, very exciting journey. And just to go back to when we started off, Tatas are a very forward-looking group. Even in 1977, we've definitely grown since then. And they took a very pragmatic decision to say that they should enter Africa. And it was in this spirit of adventure that I was asked to be a part of a team, which was to go to Zambia to see how we could start Zambia. This was a time when most of these countries were breaking the shackles of foreign rule, and so we felt there could be an opportunity. And believe me that in 1977, India was not an exporting nation, leave alone a nation which was making investments overseas. But we took this bold decision at that point of time. It was not an easy one, but yes, we ventured.
Did you have support from the group wholeheartedly at that point?
Well, I would say that it was very well supported by the group. But obviously, nobody knew much about Africa. So it was a discovery for us. And we had to, as we went along, we had to pay our way through that journey to see how we can unfold it.
What was the Africa that you encountered at that point? Obviously, it was a very different political landscape.
You're absolutely right. It was an Africa where, first of all, I can say that most of the countries used to say they had one-party participatory democracy. So that was the democracy which was there. There was, yes, very less freedom of press. It was a very controlled economy as such, and it was, the opportunities were very, very limited at that point of time. And Africa had other areas of problems. For example, exchange controls were there were foreign exchange problems, and so it was a difficult time for anybody to come and invest, because most of the businesses were in hands of the state as parastatal companies. So that is what Africa's landscape at that point of time were there. But nevertheless, there were niche opportunities.
Zimbabwe was one of the first territories that you actually physically went into.
Yes, we did. As I said, we've been very bold, and we said that we should start putting a stake in the ground in as many countries as we could. And as you are aware, Zimbabwe also gained its freedom. In fact, it was after 77. So that was one country we felt which would welcome investment from India, and that is how we went into Zimbabwe very early.
Which verticals did you have the most traction for? I see Tata Motors was generally dominant in your play.
Yes, you're right. We have used our motor company in terms of distribution of commercial vehicles. That is what we used to manufacture. To advance our businesses, it was really on the back of the motor business. And that's how we started. And there were other areas which the group was doing. The group was still, even at that point of time, very diversified. But it was not possible to do those immediately because, as I told you, India was still in its infancy itself in many ways.
Over your history with the African continent, what would you define as your biggest challenge?
Well, if you come to what are the challenges today, I think these challenges are common to other parts of the world also. But today, Africa has changed quite a bit. We have democracy in most of the countries today. There's total freedom of press, which I observe. And I think there are a lot of positives. There's growth taking place in every part of Africa. So this brings in some challenges as well, because in the past, Africa only was known for minerals. Then oil and gas came. It was limited to some of the countries, but it's now in most of the parts of Africa. And so the challenges which have come are in terms of, yes, one, we can say in terms of infrastructure, whether it be rail network, whether it be ports, roads.
Have you seen dramatic changes on the ground when it comes to the infrastructure story? Obviously, this is the debate topic on the global stage at the moment, whether we can get the infrastructure needed to push the growth on the continent.
What is today, to some extent, pushing the infrastructure story is the mineral wealth. I think it is all aligned towards that whichever country, or oil and gas. And so those countries are trying to build infrastructure to see how they can leverage that. But I feel that that is one part of the story. There has to be also a good and equitable regulatory framework, which is something which is required when you are inviting new investors. They want a level playing ground. And I think that's one thing which Africa will still have to work on. Don't forget that Africa's population is still very young. I believe the youngest probably in the world today.
Which is an opportunity.
Which is an opportunity, and in many ways, but we need to train them, to give them skills. They are quite eager to learn, which we've seen in many of our businesses. But they will have to be first competitive in terms of their skills and other aspects for Africa, and then also for the not only the continent but also internationally. And that's some area which needs to develop in Africa still.
This is a global problem. It's not just Africa's problem, is high levels of youth unemployment. But a lot of criticism is being leveled at South Africa in particular around inflexible labor laws. If you look at the World Economic Forum competitiveness report, we rank 143 out of 144 companies, or countries rather, economies, when it comes to our labor flexibility and tensions between labor and employer. Is this a concern for you operating in this territory?
Well, it's a concern, I think, for every investor and every employer. We need always labor should and the employers should have good harmony. At least in the Tata group, we are blessed with that, because worldwide we've really never had any strike or action or others. And Tata has been one of the groups which has always engaged its employees all the time. But coming to your question, that in Africa, I agree with you that there is some mismatch here which is happening. But I have a very different theory completely. You're talking more about mining and others. I feel where Africa is having the problem of unemployment is because most of the countries in Africa, South Africa being left aside, are very small. So there is no critical mass. If suppose you want to manufacture something, you just don't have the critical mass, that to make that project viable. In terms of, if we were to tomorrow put an assembly plant in Zimbabwe, it's really not viable because the numbers don't justify it. And so what needs to be done, and I've been strongly feeling this for a long time. When I really came to Africa, there was some manufacturing happening. It was happening, yes, because there was closed door policy. So, the imports were heavily taxed, and so the manufacturing became viable. Today, that's all gone. In fact, I feel the governments are looking for revenues to be coming in terms of the imports which come, and they are really monitoring that. I would digress. I would go towards manufacturing, have a regional approach, which is extremely important. I think if the continent really wants to create employment, it's got to look at that. For example, you could put a smelter on the border of, say, Zimbabwe and South Africa for ferrochrome. Why not? So, and then you could bring chrome from all over the place. You have manganese in, say, Zambia, and you could bring it from there. Why transport the raw material all out? So I think that regional approach, which allows easy flexibility of capital movement, of goods movement, of people movement has to be coined. I think that's the future. Without that, we cannot have viability as far as manufacturing and create employment.
What support is private sector getting from the public sector right now?
See, public sector first has to have a very clear policy. I don't think there's a policy framework. There is a lot of discussion and a lot of seminars,
execution.
a lot of World Economic Forums, and you discuss all these things there with big leaders being there. But nobody is looking on the ground. That why has this investor not put his investment into this venture? Why was it unviable? I think so. We've got to make those projects viable. And I think the criticality is, for example, if you want to put up a bicycle plant today, it'll be unviable. Because if you are just catering to one country and all the other countries are importing their bicycles, finished bicycles from India, from China, from Korea or other places, what's the use? Why not have whichever country has the viability? That's why I said.
So regional, leverage the regional story.
I think without that, we don't have the market size, in my view. And Africa needs that. Africa needs, and I find that Africa has got a good workforce. It needs skills, but when I say good workforce, if you have people eager to work, they don't want any subsidies. That is my own, because we do employ a lot of people, and I find that they are eager, whichever, whether you go into hospitality industry, you go to IT industry, they are always eager and they're eager to learn. So we've got a good young workforce. Why not we create abilities for manufacturing?
An enabling environment right now.
Absolutely.
We're speaking to Mr. Raman Dhawan. He is the Managing Director of Tata Africa Holdings. You're watching Captains of Industry on CNBC Africa.